Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another incredible Color of Science digital edition. But before we kick off today's great guest and a wonderful conversation with a phenomenal engineer, you might be wondering, why am I rocking this bad boy Marvel cap? Why is there an incredible Captain America shield behind? Because yesterday we dropped to the world that COSI will be hosting Marvel, a universe of superheroes, an incredible exhibition starting Thanksgiving weekend, November 26th through Memorial Day, May 30th, 2022. Do not miss it. It's incredible. If you like the comics and if you love the movies, this interactive exhibition is crazy. And yes, I'm rocking it because I'm ready. All right, that's my promo. Back to Color Science. Let me share my screen real quick. So this is our Color Science digital edition. Of course, I have to thank our sponsors. We begin with our presenting sponsors, Patel, L Brands, and then the lead funder, the Curtis T. and Beverly Cheeks Jewel Family Foundation. Additional support from CAS, Honda, and KeyBank, and it's brought in partnership with the Garvey Institute. As you know, the Color Science program is really to highlight the amazing, different men and women who contribute to science, technology, engineering, and math, right? To just demystify the fact that they're stereotyped, but really scientists and engineers come in all shapes, colors, genders, heights, you name it. And that's what this program is about. We always have incredible guests, and today is no different. We have an incredible engineer named Matthew Portis. Matthew Portis has an undergraduate degree, Bachelor's in Science in Electronics Engineering Technology from DeVry University. Then he has a Master's in Science and Engineering Management from the George Washington University School of Engineering and Science. He's a project management professional and an industry leader in IT. And as you know, you can't survive your life without IT, without ones and zeros, without digital technology. He's a technologist and a visionary, and he later moved on with his idea and founded something he's going to talk at length about today called Soul Green in 2009, and led Soul Green from startup and conception through company growth, with the first solar power workstation tables installed at Bowie State University in 2013, which led to growth today of over hundreds installed Soul Green Evoda solar tables seated at over 30 college campuses across the US and Canada. So if you've ever wanted to talk to somebody who knew not only about what science and engineering is about, but then inventing something, getting a patent, and actually then launching a company successfully, this is your chance to ask him some questions. He's a terrific guy. And now I would like to invite him up. If you want to come on camera, and I'll stop sharing my screen here. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Matthew Portis. You want to turn your camera on, Matthew?
All right, I am there. Can you see me now?
I can hear you, but I can't see you yet.
Hold on, let's see.
Folks, he's using a superpowered cloaking device right now. He's as excited as we are about Marvel. So he's gonna uncloak himself. There you go, perfect timing. Oh, he uncloaked himself again. We saw you for a split second.
All right, there we go.
There we go. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Matthew Portis, engineer, inventor, company founder, entrepreneur, and just an all-around great gentleman. Thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. That was a wonderful introduction. I appreciate that. And I appreciate all the wonderful things you're doing there at COSI. It's been a while since I was in Columbus, but I know 40 years ago when I was at DeVry University, you guys were doing some really big things there then, and I see you're still doing it. So it's an honor to be featured amongst your wonderful panelists.
Well, look, you're humble, but you're a rock star, so you deserve to be part with this great group. So thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so what we're gonna do, because I know we were having a little trouble and I wasn't able to open the video, so we're gonna jump right into it. I have a bunch of questions for you, but just to let you know, this show has gotten really popular. So we've curated questions in advance. You have kiddos from middle school, high school, adults from 20 to 80 who've come with questions, and then we open up to pull questions from the chat. So I'm gonna jump right in and see, and if we can pull up the video later, we will, but I'm gonna jump right in with a first question to kind of let you level set for us. You've had a lot of really kind of interesting roles throughout your career. We're going to get to that. But let's take it way back. Because again, this is about the color science, motivating people, being mentors for people, getting people excited to think about science, engineering, and technology. So what got you interested in science and engineering and technology?
Oh, wow. Well, it's always been one of those things. First of all, I was that hyper kid that could never sit still in class, and I always had to play, and was usually ended up in trouble or something like that. I always played too rough. And I remember when I was in elementary school, the teacher said, he's probably a little bit hyperactive. Maybe we should put him on some medication or Ritalin to slow him down. My mother was like, absolutely not. She's like, he just needs to go outside and play even more. And that was what I did. It was back when we would play, I grew up in Akron, Ohio. And actually learned to walk in California. I lived in Los Angeles, went to Shenandoah, and that was pretty much during the 80s. Then I moved back to Akron, Ohio, probably mid-teen, pre-adolescent. And, it was a great time growing up at that time. So being outdoors kind of molded that early beginning, and then of course, going off to college, I knew I wanted to do something in engineering. I remember telling my grandmother, who was really old at the time, when I was like 7, not really old, but in her 70s, I said, well, Grandma, when I go to school, I want to become an engineer. And I said, I'm going to, she says, well, I'll be too old to see you then. So I'll be in heaven. I said, well, I'm going to build an elevator to go all the way up to heaven and come see you. And you know what she said? She said, I can't wait to see that elevator.
Oh man, I love that story. This is so interesting. So you had two great kind of maternal moments. One, when schools do this all the time. So you parents who are listening, they like to label your kid as ADHD or hyperactive or etc. Now, sometimes there are real cases of that, and you do have to follow up and get the right diagnosis. But a lot of times, a kid just might have energy and be excited, and that's okay. And so your mom was like, no. We don't need to put him in a remedial class. We don't need to give him medication. We just need to have that young man play. And then your grandmother now, she steps in and says, build that elevator to heaven. I mean, what encouragement from two seminal women.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That was, just having encouragement as a kid, you don't really realize you're getting it, but you do get that encouragement. It stops as you get older. You find less people to encourage you. But that's why, like, even in college, I always jumped up. I led my project. I was a senior leader when we had to do our, at the end of engineering school, you have to build a device, or, and it has to be judged, and, it has to be working, and you have to go through a list of things, software, hardware. And I remember I worked in a team, we did it. And that was my first time really working as a project manager across systems engineering. And, things happen, just like now logging in, getting the files where we were. You have to figure out ways to pivot around that and get the job done. So, after I graduated, I found myself working for the defense system and with Raytheon, and I've lived in a couple dozen states. But one day I'm out there working on I'm working on a project, and it's after hours. It's Tucson, Arizona, and the sun is beautiful, but everyone's inside of a library. And I'm like, why is everyone inside the library? We need to figure out how to get these people that are in the library outside. And I just started thinking, like, well, how about if we had solar integrated into solar panels? And I just started thinking, I saw picnic tables, because outside there was plenty of lawns, and no one was sitting at the lawn table, the manicured flowers, and so all this money was being spent on the exterior, but no one was buying anything on the, and I mean, no one was inside using any of the accommodations. They were all filled. You couldn't. Everywhere you went, the tables were filled up. The people had been plugged up into the outlets, and outside it was just absolutely no one. So the concept came from there. If we can add solar, and we can add power, and give people shelter from the sun and the rain, then we could actually come up with something. Because this technology is what powers satellites in orbit, which powers our GPS, powers our cell phones. So the technology in the Evodia and off-grid systems have been used in space and orbit for years. You know, it's just building the vehicles to put them here. So, you know.
Okay, look, that is you've unpacked so much. I'm gonna pick this apart because this is all amazing stuff. So okay, so we got how you got into science and tech, and then we got some of your kind of transitioning through schools and your first project management. And you've had a lot of really interesting roles throughout your career. You worked for the IRS, right? So think about this. So the listeners, right? We got an engineer who worked for the IRS, and that's the Internal Revenue Service, government, making sure you're paying your taxes, etc. Right? As a technical engineer, and for the military as a senior systems test engineer with Raytheon, one of the greatest defense companies on the planet, in their missile systems. So talk a little bit about, you know, again, this is about mentorship. You're an engineer, you worked for the IRS, and also separately, you worked in the military, or for the military, as a senior systems engineer with Raytheon. Talk about those two types of roles. How are they similar? How are they different? How did your engineering degree help prepare you for those opportunities?
Oh, great question. And this is for the kids out there looking to get into engineering. Engineering is such a specialized field. There's so many fields of engineering. My undergrad is electronics engineering. So electronics engineers basically understand why things work. And what they do is we piece together the little parts. We deal with low voltage. We don't deal with high voltage. That's an electronics engineer. However, the government uses all types of engineers. They use electrical, but most electronics engineers find themselves in test and development, basically building systems, integration of little parts, just integrating pieces. Those are generally systems engineers, and they come in from all places of the professional realm. Okay. Now, when you move into testing, Raytheon is one of the biggest systems engineers. They build missiles, they test defense systems, radar systems. So they are one of the largest employers of systems engineers, along with Boeing. My first job actually was with Intel Corporation, the chip manufacturer. And it was a great job, but I felt it was boring. I was actually in New Mexico. I was in a bubble suit, and it was just, you know, good money, but it was just a little boring for someone right out of college. So I found myself in Orlando, Florida, where I actually became a systems engineer working in DoD industry, the Defense Department. And that was, of course, the contractors with Raytheon. Sure. The transition to IRS was when I left Raytheon, I began government contracting and again, tests. They have things called the asset forfeiture. So when someone's property gets taken by the government and the government takes it, I'm sorry, that was the DOJ, because I worked for the IRS and the DOJ. Yeah, so I'll get to that in a second. But the IRS, I worked on e-file systems. So the first year when all the tax users, the government decided they wanted to file their taxes in the cloud. They wanted to put everything in the cloud. So my job was testing the data from the hard drives, moving it into the cloud, and then testing that. I think we tested like 1 million users. What we were testing was to make sure that on January 1 and basically April 14th, when everyone logs into the e-file system, that it wouldn't crash. Because if it crashed, then that would be a big embarrassment for the government. And prior to that time when I was working, there had been an embarrassment with the healthcare rollout, the affordable healthcare rollout.
Oh, that's right. I remember that. It was big news.
And they were being they said, we want to make sure that doesn't happen. This was the Obama administration. So, you know, they didn't want another hiccup. So I tested that for, it was what you call a sprint in project management. So it was something that was supposed to be about 6 months to a year, but we combined it into about 4 weeks, just nonstop. So all of those, I've incumbent into the Soul Green, because when we release our products, we have to test them. So when customers get in Solar Table, it's been environmentally tested. They've been, we have the one at FIU, and I wish I had the slides to show you. I think I've sent a link. Hopefully we can get that up. But when we installed our first unit from the Evodia, it was about 2 months later, after we installed 4 units at Florida International University, Hurricane Irma came and like knocked and just pounded all 4 of them for about 3 days.
Okay.
But they survived. We called down right after. I said, "Hey, did you guys take the canopies off?" They're like, "No, they're out there using them." And I was
Listen,
like,
you got to admit, you couldn't have predicted or asked for a better test of what you created. If a hurricane couldn't take it down, you knew you had a money product right there.
well, Dr. B, here's the interesting thing. You cannot test. And this is a thing that we have to worry about with future engineers who are coming, young kids that want to be engineers. Right now, there is no way to test anything above a Category 3 hurricane. We do not have the simulation. So even when I wanted to get environmental testing, there's only a couple places in the world that do environmental testing, a company called UL Labs.
Okay.
And we would have had to send our units down there to Texas. They would have plugged it up and they simulate a storm or hurricane, but they can only simulate up to a Category 2. They cannot simulate 150-mile winds because at 150-mile winds, there's just no way to contain it. So the only way you can get a real world test, environmental test, is through the National Weather Service, which I worked for them as well.
I want to pause right there. Let me pause right there. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the Color Science Digital Edition. I have the pleasure of speaking to the engineer, inventor, entrepreneur, Matthew Portis. He's done so many things. We're going to get to his big invention. He talked a little bit about solar panels, but we're going to get more into that. But before we do that, those of you who are younger, thinking about careers and opportunities, he's an engineer. He's worked for the government in several different spaces, Department of Justice, IRS, and served the military, and worked for Raytheon in the private sector. And also, you were just about to start talking about it. You talked about you worked with weather. What did you do with weather? Because this is all, again, before your invention, which we're going to get to after weather. So talk about your experience working with weather as an engineer.
Oh, well, yeah. So when I worked for National Weather Service in Silver Spring, that was actually that was more project management side. So one of the things that the National Weather Service was able to do is they had to actually roll back some of their development. So I don't know if everyone understands what 5G is, right? So 5G is what the cell phones are operating on, and they actually use a very large amount of data, right, for files sharing, because when the National Weather Service has to see get information on a storm, they don't get a text message necessarily from satellite. They get images, and those images come down, and the weather stations, they actually look at the pictures and determine where the storm's headed. And they get a lot of them, but that's 5G. It's a lot of data. It's tons of it. Prior to 2000 and I want to say 16, they were the only agency that used 5G. Okay. So 2016, the administration at the time, the presidential administration, opened up 5G to cell phone companies. Okay. And when that happens, the National Weather Service lost almost half of their license.
Oh,
so
no
they
kidding.
A system to actually figure out how to predict the weather. I can't tell you how they did it because I had to, that's the confidential area, but I got to work.
He's talking about his high-level military U.S. government clearance, in case you thought he tried to sneak that through. I'm wearing a Marvel hat, but I don't have the clearance that this man has. Keep going, sir.
Well, thank you. But yeah, so I mean, and that was basically, what they did. So for a little time, people might have noticed their weather wasn't quite accurate. They were getting stuff, and it's like a storm will pop up, and they didn't know about it. Most of that has been fixed now, but just know there's some really smart people, some really good engineers working at the National Weather Service there. The chief engineer, really cool guy, very smart, very talented. I got a lot of respect for those guys there.
Yeah, no, look, that's great. All right, this is all a perfect setup for where we're shifting next. So again, ladies and gentlemen, this man spent an illustrious career developing all kinds of engineering fields, primarily system engineering, doing some really cool stuff, working in several different sectors. And that primed him to think, hey, maybe I can invent something and contribute to this technological space in a good way. So I'm going to ask you about that, but I want to give a shout out to Hopewell Elementary. I see you. Thanks for your little comment here. Hopewell Elementary. I hope you're getting excited listening to Mr. Portis. All right, so let's talk about your invention. And I want to be clear, I want to lay this out here. One, what exactly did you invent? And more importantly, what was that process like? Because a lot of people have good ideas, right? But going from a good idea to actually producing a product, walk us through what you invented and then the process you took to get it there.
Okay, so what I invented was the outdoor Evodia off-grid workstation, and what that is it's an outdoor there's two generations. The first generation was the solar table, and it kind of evolved into what we call now the off-grid workstation. The solar table, all of them come with automated features, right? So the lights are automatically going to come on. They're going to go off when the sun goes down. They're maintenance free, but the most it's basically allows you to charge your laptop, your cell phone, or USB device outdoor from any remote location. You can put it in the middle of the desert, it'll work.
So okay, so wait a minute. So I know I'm wearing a Captain America shirt, but speak to me like I'm a 4-year-old, which is all right. So you basically came up with something that allows you to charge pretty much any electronic device that you may have outside anywhere.
Yes.
Is that a simple way of saying? In other words, you don't need a building, you don't need a generator, you don't need an extension cord. You got your box, your table, your panel, what you built can just charge stuff anywhere, correct?
Right. Now, there's a couple things different. It doesn't charge anything. It
Okay.
charges AC. Remember, I'm an electronics engineer, so we deal with low voltage power.
Okay.
Right. So we anything that's low voltage, it's about under 300 watts. That's the first generation. These will eventually evolve into bigger systems. So the way solar works is it converts it from an AC source. You have what's called an inverter, and the inverter is in there, and the inverter is what allows the power to convert to what's called DC current, direct current, which is what laptops, cell phones, things like that. Now, it won't charge alternating current, AC current. Okay. That's anything with the motor or anything hot. So if somebody tries to power a saw off of it, it won't shut down. It just won't work. Okay. So yeah. Yep. Yep. There you go.
Okay. So walk us through your process. You had this idea. You wanted to do it. What does that look like? How do you begin? What's the middle? What's the end?
Right. So I jumped ahead a little earlier, but the way I decided when I came up with the concept was pretty simple. I was in the library looking for somewhere to plug my laptop up, ran out, didn't see any, all the plugs were in use, looked outside, saw a bunch of empty outdoor patio tables, and decided, okay, why don't we just use solar to power that up? Now, like I said, the motivation behind it was, one, this technology's been in use since since BC. They were using solar to cook food. Cook food. Sure. It became popular in the 1960s in order for them to sell solar panels. I'm sorry, not sell solar panels, but for the NASA space flight, right? And to build what we know today as the National Space Center. So we got this space center that's in Earth, and as a kid, right, I always wondered, how do we keep those satellites just orbiting, right? And there's nowhere to plug it up in orbit. They don't have a fossil plant fuel there, but yet these satellites can orbit our planet for 20 years and still powered. So why can't we do that here on Earth? Then it hit me. It's like, well, it's not the technology. We have the technology. We just don't have the vehicles, right? So 80% of what I do when I was with Soul Green when I was chief technology officer, coming up with the concept was building the infrastructure. So you want to make sure you have something because it's not cheap, right? If someone's going to pay upward of $15,000-$20,000 for a off-grid workstation, they want it to last. They want it to work for 15, 20 years. So with that, you have to build it of steel and powder coated and fiberglass. Fiberglass that we build planes and boats out of. So that's the vehicle. And then you have to make sure it's fabricated. You have to undergo, make sure it's built to national electronic codes and standards. Early on, there was a lot of industries coming out with this technology, and they were just piecing stuff together. They were setting your Polo Photonics, which is your hardware, your inverter, your batteries. They were setting it right on the ground. And what happened was everything would get flooded out as soon as it rained. We would tell a lot of these customers this. A lot of these, I won't say their name, they would still buy it because it was cheap. The products were cheap. And cheap, people say quality costs money. So our products, we've installed in Bowie State, I think in 2011, it's still there. All of our units are still working. Most of our competitors who came out with cheaper products, they have gone, they probably lasted a year, if not. However, what's weird is a lot of customers would buy cheaper products and then they would call and rebid it. We would tell them, this is the cost of ours. They would go back and buy the same product that broke. We've seen some even HBCUs that have done this, that have cheaper products that have broken, and they continue to recycle those cheaper products rather than buying one quality product.
Yeah. Wow. So all right. I love how you talked about we're using solar energy. First, you said early 1900s. Then you're about to say 1800s. They said, wait a minute. Back in BC, we've been harnessing the sun. So let me kind of pivot and get a bigger, broader question for you. With that said, obviously you're working in an environmentally friendly kind of context. What's your vision for tomorrow's green technology?
Oh, great. I'm super happy you're there. We are actually moving a lot further than we have at any point in time when it comes to clean energy. The only thing we have to work on is the cost. For a long time, solar has been considered free. People don't want to pay for it. Organizations don't want to pay for it. What they don't understand is solar costs a lot of money. It's very expensive. You know, NASA had used billions of dollars to build the flight station. So what organizations have to understand is if they really want to enact clean environment and they really want to see a future where we are offset from a lot of the fossil fuels, they've got to spend money. They've got to sponsor. They've got to pay for quality technology. When it comes to solar, you don't want to say, and we've rebranded our products. We've taken solar out completely. We're off grid. Because again, solar is linked to cost savings and not cost spending. Whereas in order to sustain a future, we have to start looking at off-grid and solar as cost spending to buy and invest quality products. Because if you don't put money into it, and another thing, the future is dependent on companies like Soul Green and new companies to come on the market. Because I'll tell you, the large companies have stopped working for consumers. General Electrics, even Raytheon, right? Where I worked for 7 years, they originally started out building consumer products. They invented the microwave, right? Toasters, they were doing a lot of that. But then in the 90s, they switched to DoD contracts. Same thing with GE. GE came, the stoves, the refrigerators, all that, they converted to medical. And the reason why is because the consumer is very picky. They're hard to please. It's hard to buy and build stuff with the consumer, and the consumer doesn't really want to pay, right? So the future, what I see is that trash can that you have in your kitchen shouldn't just collect trash, right? It should be composting food. It should be shredding plastic. It should be shredding paper. It should be doing all of that, and it should be making waste more manageable, right? Yeah. But you have to pay. Trash can might cost $200, right? Sure. So the question is, would they be willing to pay $200 for a trash can that composts food, shreds paper? Those are
I'm ready to sign up for it. Yes.
You're
ready. I'm ready to do that. No, I mean, they always talk about the simple expression, you get what you pay for, and quality stuff does cost more. So I love that. So this is a part of the show that I shift to questions that were submitted in advance. Again, you're listening to the Color Science Digital Edition. It's my honor to be interviewing Mr. Matthew Portis, incredible engineer, entrepreneur, inventor, an all-around great guy. So we got a bunch of questions, different age groups. When I know the age, I'll share it with you. So let's start off with a youngster here. This is Jessica W. She's homeschooled. She says, can you make a solar operated toy?
Jessica, yes, you can. That would be such a cool thing to do. And I know lots of kids would love it. And actually, a solar operated toy would probably last a lot longer than a battery operated one. So yes.
Okay, very cool. Listen, I think you might want to partner with Jessica and maybe you two can go patent something, Mr. Portis. All right, now we have Kavion, who's 14. He wants to know what made you choose solar? And if you could do one thing differently at the start of your invention, what would that be and why?
Good question. So solar I think I was attracted to it because it was just a cool feature to generate power from the sun. It just made sense. It makes sense to me. If I could do something earlier on, I would have probably I'm not a sales guy. I've never been the best in sales, but probably spent more time on the investment pitch side. There's a very thin line. You have to, if you're an engineer, you're an inventor, you have to kind of focus on that craft, but you also have to go out and pitch and things like that. The question was trying to find out who to pitch to and who would take a minority-owned company and a Black man serious, right?
Sure. Very interesting. Well, and that's why the color of science is created, right? So that more people understand that scientists and engineers can be women, can be African American, can be Latino, can be members from the LGBTQ community. I mean, anybody can be a scientist or an engineer. That's part. So I love that as a perfect dovetail to why we're doing this show, so people can see you and be like, wait a minute, yeah, I need to take a meeting with this guy. I'm a venture capitalist. Yeah, I should invest in him because engineers can look like him. So thanks for that point. All right, I'm bumping up to now Heidi. Heidi's 42, and Heidi works at AEP, so American Electric Power. So you're talking about probably another kick butt engineer here, Heidi. So Heidi wants to know, how many workstations have you sold, and have you seen more interest since the pandemic?
The question is, we've sold just under about 100 units. We sold a lot, and usually we sell 4 at a single location. So together we're probably at about 30 plus locations. I don't have the exact number. We do have some pretty big news that I can't share right now. So we might have a really large one for another country coming up here.
And how about the pandemic? How about the pandemic? Did the pandemic trigger an increase in sales, or?
Pandemic actually hurt us a lot. It killed us. We were pending on dozens of orders, and one by one, when the pandemic came, the mayors and the city called us and said the money had been shifted away. So we actually sold our last utility I think we sent it to Miami-Dade in 2000, or actually we installed it in 2020, but we sold it in 2019. But we had the city of Alexandria, a lot of cities just canceled. And now they did mention they would come back, but it's one of those things where when it does, you have to try to get it going, or start the whole sales process over again.
Yeah, and we've seen that in several sectors, and it's really tough. Hopefully they do come back. So we look forward to that for you. So right. Sarah C, don't know Sarah's age, but Sarah C wants to know, how can solar energy be incorporated into everyday life? That's the first question. And the second question is, I love this one, are there personal health risks associated with solar energy? Now, I happen to be of color, and I know why we got melanin, and so there's this UV radiation, and you can definitely get skin cancer, melanoma, etc. But that's from you tanning too long or spending too much time in the sun. Specifically around leveraging solar power, can it be incorporated to everyday use in an efficient way? And I know you said earlier it's very expensive, that's the only issue, but talk more about it. And then 2, are there any personal health risks associated with solar energy?
Oh, wow, great question. And I'm glad you brought that up. It is there is a little risk to solar, not a lot. On the back of the solar panel, there's something called EMT, electromagnetic transfer, that comes off. Mm-hmm. And if you're directly under that, it can cause problems that you can't see. Now, early on,
what kind of problems? When you say cause problems, what do you mean? Like cancer-inducing problems, or?
It can cause some skin radiation. And I have studies on it. I'm just going off of the data that we saw when we said you should put shielding up under.
Got it.
So you have to have shielding. The most damage, though, from using solar technology, other than that, if you're sitting, you would have to be sitting pretty close under a solar panel. But for a couple hours, if you're sitting there every day, eventually things would happen. To get over that, So Green, we put fiberglass. We put all of our canopies on top of fiberglass, so they would never even get anywhere near that. The other thing is sun. Of course, you got to realize the solar is attracting sun. The more sun it gets, the better. So you want to protect yourself with that. So that's why our canopy is so huge. Our canopy weighs, oh my God, it weighs a couple 100 pounds with the solar panel on it. And it's a huge piece of shielding equipment that shields you from the sun, the rain, the snow. And you really want to be shielded from that if you're sitting under. Now, early stage, there were some solar panels that came out and they had no shielding, and you were basically sitting under a solar panel on a pole.
Okay.
And they went out of business. But another one that was cheaper than ours. But yes.
Okay. And what about the everyday use in everyday life?
Oh yeah.
How close are we to that?
Well, we're already there. So we use solar right now already. The power that comes from your home in most states, in California, a lot of the states comes from solar power. Most 80% of the solar panels that are sold go to power companies, electrical power companies.
Okay.
They generate that and they sell it back to the grid. So it's already being used there. It's just not, there are no commercial aspects of it. So Sovereign is the only commercial product of its kind. Commercial means buildable, repeatable, and expandable. You can build many, you can expand it over time, and has been tested, environmentally tested. So Sober is the only one out there of that. So it's being used right now. And it's also used, it was used in the 80s in calculators. You can see those ones with the little solar strip. So we're there. We need to build more commercial products though, more commercial products like toys.
Okay, got it. Got it. Very cool. All right. Here's a great question from Shannon K. I don't know how old Shannon K is, but Shannon K wants to know, could solar powered objects work without sunlight? Now, I don't know if that means, I mean, obviously you need the sun to start it, but I guess let's say you power it up and then the sun it's nighttime, for example.
Right. So it won't work at night. You have to have some sun there, but it can work through the clouds. People also always ask me when we install, well, if it's raining out, will I still power up? You will. Yeah. And the way the technology works, another thing people will ask, and this might help you understand how it works a little bit, Shannon, but the power, you have batteries. You have what's called battery storage. Your solar panels actually charge the batteries, right? During the day, they're always charging your batteries. So when you plug your iPhone up to outlet that's plugged into the GFP, you're actually running on the batteries, and the batteries are being charged. So what happens is at night, once the solar panels aren't charging anymore, then you run on the batteries. And depending on how big the battery is, and if it's been charging all day, then you're going to have a few hours on each battery. So in the case of the Evodias, you got about 10 hours worth of power after the sun goes down. And that powers your lights, your cell phones, and things like that.
Got it. Got it. Very, very cool. Very cool. So I guess as they continue to figure out how to optimize batteries, we'll get better and better. And a little bit of solar power might be able to be stored a long time in these batteries and then really solve our problems.
Right. Yep.
Okay, exactly. Great. All right. So now we got Amy S. Amy S wants to know, how will the pandemic change schools and science centers forever that will impact them financially, negatively, and practically? So reframing the question, how will pandemic change schools, and how will pandemic change your technology?
Okay, yeah, definitely. So it's already changed our product. So we have the solar table, the first generation, which was basically mostly hand wired. Then we have the Evodia 1, which is the off-grid workstation, and it comes with automated lights. So as soon as the sun goes down, the lights come on. As soon as the sun comes up, they go back off. And 24-hour plug. One thing we're adding to the Evodia 2, which will be available next spring. We wanted to have it this year, but because of the pandemic, we have to push our release back. But there is the Evodia 2, which comes with COVID killing lights. So it's an automated system. Oh, wow. Sitting there. There's what's called far UVA lighting, and it'll kill the surface area. So any COVID, microbial, they use the lights that are in labs, it'll automatically kill them.
Well, it's funny you say that. Here at COSI, we've actually invested in photohydroionization technology, which is in our HVAC system and circulates the air and similarly kills all the pathogens, including viruses and bacteria. So very cool. So I see what you're talking about.
Exactly. So that we actually incorporate through powering, by powering those same lights and that same technology with off-grid power, solar power, and we've integrated it into the Evodia 2. So, and the thing about that is it's dangerous if you're sitting directly under it. So you have to kind of move away. Ours are censored so that it'll detect when someone's sitting there, so the lights won't come on. They only come on when they're not there.
Got it. Got it. Very cool. All right. Couple more questions. I'm now mixing questions from the chat and questions that are submitted in advance. Victoria wants to know, And you talked a little bit about this. So what helped you decide your career to pursue? You talked about that. But she wants to know, and I don't know how old Victoria P is, but she wants to know, what were you like in elementary school? And I want to tag on to that. And I mentioned the intro, but I want you to say it. I want to tag on to that because one of the questions in the chat says, what colleges did you go to? So what were you like in elementary school? I know you talked about a little bit being excited, but say a little more. What were you like in elementary school? And then what colleges did you go to?
Great. You know what? I sent you so my school that I went to DeVry University in Columbus, Ohio. And I studied electronics engineering. College was not the easiest for me. People think, oh, you were smart. I actually struggled. I studied, I worked full time through college. So for me, it was an effort, but I knew it was the only way to really come out ahead in life, period, right? Because no one, without your college degree, it would have been a lot tougher for me to do the things I wanted to do as far as engineering and innovation and things like that. Sure. So in college, I was usually the guy that was, I was walking around with my books. I was always trying to find the time to study to get to the library because usually my classes would work 7 a.m. I would be in class, wow. Breaks in between, but I would leave around maybe 4 or 5. I remember I had a couple schedules. Then I would go home, get an hour of sleep. Then I would get up and go to work. I worked at Value City Furniture warehouse distribution in college. And at night I would load furniture and do that and then go back, get ready for school. And it was a process every day. That was literally the way. And then in college and grad school, going to GW, that was a lot more, when I waited a few years. Kids, you want to wait a little time if you can in between working to get your master's. For me, it was a lot. I appreciated a lot more. I wanted to understand a lot more about managing projects. And I never got education just because I wanted to be smart or I wanted to know more. I always learned because I wanted to know that I could do it. I got a master's in engineering management because I wanted to know how to manage engineering projects. Yeah. And the PMP, I wanted to be a professional project manager in order to be taken serious. And I find as people of color, you kind of have to, if you really want to be taken professionally, you've got to really go for those professional certifications as well as those degrees as well.
No. Love it. That's a terrific answer. We're getting near the end of the program. One of the cool things we do is we have a STEAM challenge. So I'm going to share my screen at one point, walk you through that real quick, and then bring you back on. But before I get to that, I just want to get one last question here. This one is from Jason. Jason wants to know, what was the toughest thing you experienced either as a college student or in your professional career? What was the toughest and how did you overcome it? So toughest experience in your professional career and how did you overcome it?
Okay. For college, for me, the toughest experience was getting through, really. It's so easy to give up. So for me, those moments in college really came when I was working through college. Like I just explained, waking up. There were times when I would wake up at 6 o'clock. I'm like, wait a minute, or 7. I'm like, do I have to be at work or do I have to be at school? I couldn't remember.
Sure.
But you know what? It's something that you go through. I call it life is an adventure. So sometimes the more stuff you go through, the better life is for you. It's an adventure. Who wants to just be bored? That would have been no fun, right? Yeah. And then at work, one of the toughest things as far as being a contractor is is really leaving the positions that I've had. A lot of the positions when I've relocated, a lot of times I've relocated because of funding issues with the DOD, Department of Defense. Opportunities run out of funding, so you always have to look for another opportunity, and it takes you around, right? But working with some of the people have been really cool, but a lot of the things professional in the career I've worked have been boredom, honestly. Some of the projects. A lot of times when I was an engineer working for Raytheon, you would be working on requirements. The projects are so large, you really don't know where it fits in at. When I began doing consulting, I found I narrowed a little bit more in it when I was working with the IRS and the DOJ and things like that, the National Weather System. That part was not as difficult. But earlier on, when I was more younger in my career, it was boredom. And that boredom was kind of what led me to other stuff with building the Evodia system and things. So I was bored with that. And I'm like, why don't I try this?
Sure. I love that. I mean, it's funny. We most of the panelists get that kind of question. What was the toughest thing in your life? And no one has ever said that, but I love that you brought that up because boredom can be a roadblock and you got to figure out how to motivate yourself to get around and do something. All right. So this is the last question before I get to the STEAM challenge. And this is, again, you're listening to Color Science Digital Edition. I get to view incredible men and women of all shapes and sizes and sounds. Today, we're interviewing Matthew Portis, an incredible engineer, inventor, entrepreneur, all-around great guy. And just to tell you how all-around great guy is, I'm going to out you right now. He's published fictional and non-fictional books, and he's I'm not done yet, and he's a cycle instructor. And you've completed over 16 Olympic distance triathlons, as well as, and that's plenty, as well as several Ironman competitions. Now, again, little plug for COSI. I'm wearing the Marvel hat because we announced yesterday that we'll be hosting Marvel, a universe of superheroes, Thanksgiving weekend through May of 2022. Definitely come check it out. One of the biggest heroes, of course, along with the Captain America shield here and behind me, is Iron Man. Well, I am interviewing an Iron Man himself, Matthew Portis, who has done several Iron Man competitions. So 16 Olympic triathlons, you're a writer, fiction, nonfiction, you're doing Iron Man competitions. I gotta ask you, what's next for Matthew Portis?
Oh wow, yeah. So I was gonna grab my Iron Man hat. So I did Ohio Man Ironman just in July, which I love Ironmans. I will not do another one in July. That was my first and last. It was too hot there. I mean, I saw people getting IVs and everything. I was like, just happy to make. I've done Lake Placid, a few other ones. Yes, I've enjoyed that. I have to stay busy. That's the way that you do it. So when I want to be doing Ironmans, and coming up next is going to be I'm doing the Century Ride, 109-mile ride in Maryland, East Shore, to Salisbury. Do it every year. It's a great ride. If there's any cyclists out there, one thing I love about
folks, we just lost him while we try to get him back. And he was going from his phone. So I know he's invented some charging stations, so he'll probably be able to figure out how to charge that. But in the meantime, it's a perfect way for me to transition to our STEAM competition. So I'm going to share my screen. It's one of the funnest parts of this Color Science Digital Edition. I'm going to share my screen here. All right, so we have our STEAM challenge. And the STEAM challenge for this September month, the theme is energy. So you know how this works. You kiddos and adults alike, please come up with whatever 2D or 3D project based on energy. It can be a drawing, a painting, something you created, and then you're going to take a photograph of that and you're going to send that photo to Vanessa Bowers. That's vbowers@cosi.org. Again, that's vbowers@cosi.org. The deadline for this is October 2nd, so you have 1 month to send it in. And as you know, we have really cool prizes. First place is an iPad mini. Second place is a hologram machine. And the third place are a series of our COSI Connects kits. And of course, because it's an energy theme, you're going to get the COSI Connects energy kit, possibly with a space kit. So again, that's our STEAM competition in honor of the incredible guest we're interviewing today, Matthew Portis. I hope you enjoyed this show. It's always a pleasure to speak to all of you. And again, this is Color Science Digital Edition, brought to you by COSI Connects. I want to thank Ms. Vanessa Bowers, who produces this show. And let me unshare my screen, because one more time, I have to do the commercial for COSI. And that's, we announced Marvel Universal Superheroes coming to Columbus, Ohio at COSI only. Thanksgiving Day weekend starting November 26th, all the way through May 30th. But don't wait, it's going to be packed. Everything you love about the superheroes, it's all going to be here inside our amazing building. Come check it out and learn about the superhero in you. That concludes another wonderful Color Science edition. Thank you for spending the time with us, and we'll catch you next month, same time, same place, first Thursday of every month. from 12 to 1. Have a great day, folks. Bye-bye.